Hey guys and gals, Jack Spirko here with the final episode of Miyagi Mornings for the week, and we talked a lot about economics and cryptocurrency and stuff like that this week. So I don't want to. I don't want to talk about anything like that. I want to keep my commitment to you guys to bring you a lot of variety in this show. There was just a lot going on in that world this week. Today, I went on our Telegram group and said, hey, throw some ideas at me, and I'll pick one of the first three for an episode today. And so if you want to have some more direct feedback and interaction with me, and by the way, I was sharing crypto trades in real time yesterday in our Telegram group. Maybe you should we should get on Telegram with us. Anyway, one of the suggestions was what business to start right now. Not how or why, but an idea for ideas for business. I'm not going to do ideas. Ideas are multi, and then that makes a little short video into a great big long one, which kind of is counter to what we're trying to do here. So, what we're going to talk about today is one business idea that's a little bit unconventional. I've talked about it before in different aspects, but I actually think it will be a great way to make some pocket money, some connections, some maybe valued local connections this spring. There are going to be shortages in the food supply this year. There are going to be, I'm going to say it again so you get it. There are going to be shortages in the food supply this year. The price of food is going to go up. People are going to panic. I think it will be worse than 2020 when the panic sets in. You will have limits at grocery stores, long lines again, blah, 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 blah. And you're either going to have one of two things happen with the virus. Either restrictions will be let up because we kind of have to at some point, and that will create a cascade of all the restaurants opening, etc., and a massive demand on a dwindled system. Or you keep the restrictions in place or you increase them, which also could happen. And that's going to create more panic buying when people get to the grocery stores as we have limited supply. Either way, we're going to get a supply squeeze. Now, last year, just look at human behavior in the past to know human behavior in the future. It's that simple. Last year when this set in, not only did everybody run into the grocery store and buy tons of shit they didn't understand how to use in the first place, like dried beans. You had people with baskets full of dried beans that never made a dry bean, probably went home and put them in a microwave and caused an explosion. I'm sure that happened. But also everybody got into what? I'm going to grow my own food, which I think a lot of people figured out was not as easy as they thought it would be. Maybe some people even broke into the survival seed bank that was like 17 years old and none of the damn seeds germinated because they hermetically sealed them and cut them off of oxygen for 17 years. Another thing. But people also got crazy big into raising their own chickens and livestock. Here's the interesting thing about a chicken. You get a little bitty fuzzy chicken. Anybody who's done this knows you have to feed that little sucker for about 22 to 24 weeks before the first butt nugget pops out. Got it? Same thing with ducks, and you can do either one of these for this business model. You should check your market and see what's in more demand, ducks or chickens. You'll probably find for the average homesteader in the suburban rural fringe, the chicken is the first place they go. And while I prefer ducks myself, I think chickens are a great gateway. And they're also easier to hatch at higher rates to fit this business model. So I want you to think about the business model that your average meat farmer takes with a chicken. They get a bunch of these ugly little Cornish cross birds in, right? And they then put that sucker in a brooder for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the climate. And then they move them out to like a chicken tractor or a paddock shift system. And they raise them up for about 8 to 12 weeks total in the total time that they have to feed them. And then they sell that bird. To sell that bird as a meat bird, it has to be processed. That either means you pay a facility or you do it on farm. I don't know about you, but I've bought pastured birds like that, and they range in cost about $18 to $25, depending on how big they are, because they usually sell by the pound, like any other meat. Okay. I want you to think about this. Many years ago, before all this pressure was, and everybody was really, really excited, and there were shortages in supplies, I used to run chickens. I had about 80 chickens, and I was doing it as an egg business. And we started making a lot more money on the duck eggs than the chicken eggs, so I'm like, chicken's got to go. So I had a bunch of birds that were between 18 and 20 months of age, laying now birds, right? Not old hens, hens with a good year or two, especially for a backyard. Like if you're commercial, you don't want a 3-year-old bird. if you're residential backyard suburbanite small homesteader, birds keep laying until they're 5 years old. They just lay less, right? And if you have a few birds and a couple old ones and a couple young ones, it all evens out. It's fine. It's good to have some old birds in your flock. So people are willing to buy the older birds, but I had like prime laying age, maybe one more big cycle in them, and I put them up for sale. $25 a piece. If you buy at least X number of hens, I'll give you a rooster for free. I was trying to get rid of my roosters too and rehome. Sold them all. Sold every one of them. It was the best of times. Nobody was panicking to get into this business or whatever. So let's dial that back a little bit. I just went on Craigslist today, and there's a person out selling cinnamon queens, which are a pretty good little layer hen. They're selling them for $12 a piece. Looking at the photos, it doesn't state. Looking at the photos, I would say these birds are 6 weeks old, if that. Now, what if you started hatching out birds and sold young pullets, probably on Craigslist or maybe Facebook Marketplace? It's like one of the few good uses. I don't know if you can sell animals. I don't know what Facebook does anymore. But whatever local advertising stuff you can do, and you control the numbers so that you don't end up going, negative on this, and you raise these birds to about 14 weeks, and you advertise this, and will start laying within 1 to 2 months, which is valid because you're not going to sell them all the day you put them up for sale. Some of them are going to get older before they're bought. You sell those birds to people at $20 or $25 or $18 or $16 or whatever your market will bear. You sell them as known gender and they're already out of the brooder. The people that get into chickens the first time, they don't necessarily know how to raise little chickens in a box. It's a good skill to learn, but a lot of them, like, you mean I can just buy a chicken that's almost ready to lay or laying? And the older it gets, the more the price goes up. Now, when you compare this, would you rather sell a chicken that you raised for 14 weeks, had to feed for 14 weeks, for $20, or a chicken that you raised for 10 weeks, had to process, do all that extra work with, for $20? I know which one I'd rather sell. And while you're doing this, so you might think, well, how do I get into this little side business here? I think if you go buy chicks and do this, you're going to lose your ass. That base cost of the chick, and those are going to go up this year, by the way. I'm going to tell you that right now. However, there are ways to do this. If you have a Tractor Supply or something like that near you, you'll often find that they put those guys, their chick days run about a month, and that'll be in March. And they have those little round tubs, like the stock tanks, the metal ones, and they put them in there. And they're about 2 foot high. Yeah, at about 1.5 weeks of age, those little suckers start to get feathers on them. Chickens grow really fast, and they start flying the hell out of there. And a lot of times, if there's a manager in there that has some authority, and usually there is, and you can usually find them pretty easy, they'll say, like, I'll sell them all for 50 cents a piece. You got to take them all, though. Might as well be free at that price. And they've raised them for a week, week and a half, 2 weeks for you. That's one way. Another way is there's a whole lot of people going broke selling chicken eggs. Get your ass on Craigslist, find all the local people selling chicken eggs, phone them up, say, what kind of birds do you have? Do you have roosters? Are your eggs fertile? When you find the combination of answers you like with that, I would like to buy X number of eggs from you. I don't want them washed and I don't want them refrigerated. Can you do that? Trust me, they will say yes most of the time. See, I need them all collected within 10 days of each other, and I need to know when to pick them up. They will stay at room temperature, viable, and hatch out about all the same time, as long as you get them all and keep them at room temperature, not cold, not hot, for about a 10-day period. They'll hatch within a day of each other. And you go get your happy ass little incubator. Better quality incubator would make sense. I'll put an incubator I'm trialing right now that I think is going to be a great incubator in the show notes. I'll put another incubator I've used called IncuView in the past. And you can hatch those birds out and raise them. Now all you have is feed costs. And here's my last thing. As a duck farmer that eats the produce and sells the produce of my ducks, which are primarily butt nuggets, eggs, I have a niche market in that I do not feed soy to my birds. I do not feed GMOs to my birds. And I'm not ever going to. If I'm raising these little chickens for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, before they ever lay an egg. And my entire purpose in raising them is to sell them. I'm going to feed them the cheapest feed that they'll eat that's healthy enough to get them to grow. Because I know they're going to leave my grounds. And I know when they leave my grounds, they're going to eat whatever that person cares enough to feed them. There's no purpose in me feeding $22 a bag premium feed like I feed to my flock, when I could be feeding $9 a bag feed for now, by the way. That's a little tips coming here in a minute. There's no sense in it if the person's just going to go home and feed them Purina. It doesn't make any sense. And if that person's going to move them over, and I'm going to definitely recommend the feed that I use to them. And if they move them over to that, once they start laying, it doesn't matter what they ate when they were young. They're going to be fine. I know some people are real purists about that. No, it won't matter. It won't matter if I feed it and they switch to the negative. And in the long duration, it's not going to matter if I feed them cheap stuff and they switch to the premium. They're going to get the product they produce anyway. So why am I going to up my costs in that situation, especially when this is a money-making endeavor that we're involved in? Now, I know what you're thinking. What about the roosters, Jack, when you do that? I'm going to eat them. And as soon as I can identify them as roosters, I'm going to separate them. I'm going to tractor them. I'm going to feed them a premium feed. I'm going to pasture raise them. And yeah, they're going to be a little bit small as a meat bird, but I'm going to put them in my freezer. Or, when people are buying, I'm going to say, I got these roosters over here. If you'd like one, they're X dollars. And anything that I think is worth less, right, than what that bird's worth to me in meat, I'll say no to. Depending on how big it is, how old it is, how much more I got to feed it. Now I'm producing meat. I'm producing birds for sale. I'm making more money on my labor than I would if I was selling meat. I'm doing it with basic chickens. I've got a lot of options in how I produce them. I got a lot of options in how I source them. And it's just a one little thing. And let's run some numbers real quick before we wrap up here into how much gross revenue we could be talking about here. Let's say you get $25 a bird. I don't think that's going to be hard this spring. Anything that's close to laying, $25 a bird is going to be easy to get unless you live in a place where everybody already has them. Because that changes everything, right? And you probably forgot another animal to do this with then. So $25 a piece, and let's say that we do 50, right? 50 of them. What's that? 500 twice is 1,000. $1,250, right? That's probably right. Could be wrong. Say $1,250. Let's say you have $200, $300 worth of feed in that. Say $300. Say you have $250 worth of feed in that. You have $1,000 cash between you, person that paid you, and the fence post in your pocket. What will that do for you on your homestead? How will that let you expand other businesses? Now, I'm going to caution you. You're probably going to have to produce close to 100 birds to get that, because you're going to get a bunch of roosters, but you're going to eat them. No, you're not going to get those big plump breasts that you would get off a Cornish cross, but you're going to get chicken. And some of those roosters will sell, and some of them won't. And the beauty is you can harvest them as you need to. Now, that doesn't mean run out and do this. You need to run your own numbers, source your own birds, make sure this makes sense to you. You're going to have to recover the cost of that incubator, $150 to $200 for a good incubator. I don't believe in those little styrofoam hover baiters. Screw that shit. They're not accurate. I won't use them. They work, but digital is the way of the future. This is 2021, and it's worth the investment, in my opinion. They do work. I hatched snakes, believe it or not, for years with them. And you can fiddle with them and get them just right. Man, automatic turner, digital incubator, set and forget. It knows what you're doing. This is for ducks, this is for chickens, etc. It knows when to stop turning. And all. It's just humidity control's easier. So there's some cost in this. But you end the year with money in your pocket. Now you have an incubator. You have meat in the fridge. You see what I'm saying? Now, I'm also saying not necessarily go do this one. There might be something else. Use this model to figure out what works for you. And if you in the comments, folks, tell me, well, you can't do that here, I'm just going to assume that you didn't understand a word I said. All right. With that, hope you had a great week. Let's go ahead and wrap things up. I'll be back next week with another episode of Miyagi Mornings. And remember, the Miyagi Mornings podcast recap in audio only will be out sometime on Saturday morning.